everybody. I'm Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. The aim of this podcast is to raise awareness about blindness, visual impairment, and disability in general, in a happy and light-hearted way. For those of you that don't know, I am blind. I was born with a condition called bilateral anophthalmia. Try spelling that one. It basically means that when I was born, my eyes didn't develop properly, so I wear prosthetics instead. The goal of this podcast is to remove some of the stigma and stereotypes around disabilities, whilst also having fun at the same time. Each week, I will be interviewing people from all walks of life, including some with hidden or physical disabilities like mine, and getting to know a little bit more about them and the lives they lead. This week, I am very excited to tell you that I will be talking to composer, record producer, guitarist, and total legend in the world of music, Nile Rodgers. My name is Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. Hey Niall, how are you?
Very well, Evie.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
It's cool. I just woke up, so if I'm a little brain foggy, you will forgive me, please.
Of course, of course. What time is it for you over there?
So it's not that it's that early, it's just that right now I am totally preoccupied with my this is sounding crazy. So I'm actually working on a film score, a West End musical, and I found my original 700-page autobiography, which I culled down to 300 pages, which is the one that came out. But now everybody's going, oh, we want to make a television series out of this. You got to find the 700 pages. Well, I found them, and I'm going through them, and I'm actually fascinated and overwhelmed. So I'm not getting much sleep.
Oh my gosh. Okay, yes. That sounds like you have a lot to do at the minute then.
Yeah, no kidding. And I found that because, and this has only happened about a week ago, that it's created this new wacky sleep pattern where I fall asleep around 9 p.m. at night, and I wake up at 11, and those 2 hours sleep feel like a whole night. So when I wake up at 11, I'm wide awake. And then I go to sleep again very early in the morning. And so now I'm just waking up now in the afternoon, which is so unlike me. So as I said, so forgive me if I sound not quite on my game, but you seem terrific and you'll cover me.
Well, thank you. That's very sweet. But you sound absolutely fine. Don't worry. But I actually, funny story. I had a Braille music lesson this morning. I play the flute, and I do weekly like Braille music lessons over WhatsApp voice call with a teacher in the UK, and she's also blind. But anyway, the point of this is, my mum was at work this morning, so I was home alone, and I had to get myself up and stuff. And I'd set my alarm for 9 a.m. And bearing in mind, I had triple checked that this alarm was set. So I was like, we're cool. So I went to sleep, and this lesson was at 10 a.m. I was woken up at 10 a.m. by my teacher calling me. So I just had to pick up and act like I hadn't woken up 2 minutes before, and it was not good at all.
Oh, that's cool. You probably don't know this, but my very first instrument was the flute.
Really?
Yeah. I was born with asthma, and and in America, there was the period of a standardized education system, and this particular class, they would assign you whatever instrument was lacking in their little orchestra. And and they gave an asthmatic kid of 6 years old an open hole flute. I was dying. And then the next year I was going to a different school, And this wonderful, brilliant teacher gave me a closed hole artly. And I was able, all of a sudden, I was playing like I was almost like a virtuoso. It was like, wow, this is great. So,
Love that. But yeah, a flute, yeah, probably not the best choice, but
and certainly not an open hole.
no, not at all. My God. Okay, then. So, to begin with, could you tell me a bit about what your childhood was like?
Wow. So on paper, people would think that it was horrible because um, both my parents, and I have to say all three of my parents, because my biological father, as well as my stepfather and my mom, were all heroin addicts. Um, but this was the era of, shall I say, the cool heroin addicts. My parents were beatniks, so they were intellectuals. They loved art, they loved music, and they loved me. And I was raised to care about people. I was a nice kid. I was a good kid. I never got into any trouble. I never stole anything. I never had a fight, nothing of that sort. And my parents never disciplined me except for one time. And and the one time that they disciplined me was because I accidentally set the windowsill on fire because I was a Boy Scout and I arranged stick matches in a circular fashion like logs, set it on fire, not realizing that when the oxidation process happened, that the fire would also sort of go down as well as going up. Just when all the matches lit up, and it was like, ah. So they came home, and this was the extent of their discipline. They stared at me for 5 minutes. This is how cool they were, beatniks, awesome. Stared at me for 5 minutes and went, uh, "My man, dig yourself." And that was discipline because they knew that I wasn't trying to set the house on fire. I wasn't doing anything bad. I just didn't think it through. And I was only 7 years old, so give me a break.
Okay, yeah, no, that does actually make sense, to be fair. I get that. But I mean, did you kind of like that you weren't disciplined much?
Well, I loved it because I didn't do anything to be disciplined for. I mean, my parents never, so sometimes people of a certain age will not quite understand this. But when I was younger, part of being a child was playing outdoors. We didn't have video games yet. We had board games and things like that. But even those board games, sometimes we would take outdoors. And I lived 1 block away from a park that had that had benches with checkerboards and chessboards set up. So I would go there and I'd play outdoors. And most children were told to come home when the street lights came on. But my parents never told me that because there were tons of remedial programs that I would partake in. And these remedial programs taught me music on a much higher level than they were teaching when I was 7 or 8 years old. And they also were designed to help European immigrants assimilate into American society. So I learned a great deal about American history. I learned a great deal about politics. And literally, I was only 7 to 8 years old. Oh, and by the way, because I was quite sickly when I was born, I lived in a medical facility, what they called a convalescent home at the time, but it was actually one of their specialties, or as you would probably say, specialities, was helping children with respiratory diseases, and I had asthma. So I was raised in a one-room classroom at 6 years old, and I learned the same thing that the 16-year-olds learned. So by the time I was 6 and a half, I was reading in America what they called on an eighth grade level. So the very first book I completed was Treasure Island. The second book I completed was Moby Dick. Try and read Moby Dick now. It is unbelievably loaded with polysyllabic words and the vocabulary is incredible. But I still got through it, even though I didn't quite fully understand it, but I got the gist of it.
Oh, wow. I mean, that is really cool that you were able to do that at such a young age. Like, that's amazing. I mean, you are a total legend in the world of music. But I was wondering, like, where does your love of music stem from and what do you love about it?
So as I said earlier, my parents were quite artistic. They loved the arts, even though they themselves, my mom was not a singer or a musician. My biological father, on the other hand, was actually a very great musician and was sought after by some of the biggest band leaders in America. But uh, music and art just filled my house. And it's funny, if you were in any of my offices or my house, you would see tons and tons uh, of awards that I've won. But I always like to tell people my greatest achievement was at 7 years old. I ditched school. I played hooky or cut school. I don't know whatever the slang is you may use, but 75 days straight without getting caught. And I went to the movies. I went to the cinema every single day, and I saw more movies than you can imagine. So by the time the police caught me, can you imagine what I learned at 7 years old, being able to read at an eighth grade level and seeing films in foreign languages and reading subtitles and all that stuff, way beyond what they were teaching in school. So I had, from my point of view, I had a phenomenal childhood.
I mean, that is low-key impressive. Like, skipping school for 75 days, I'm going to be honest, that is impressive, to be fair.
I planned that with military precision. The fact that I could get away with it. Um, so I was baptized Roman Catholic, but my stepfather is Jewish. So at this point in time, I happened to be living in Los Angeles. It's a complicated story because my mom had just had her second child. Oh, and by the way, my mother was is only 14 years older than me. She fell pregnant the first time she had sex at 13 years old. So my mom was like my big sister, and so I had to move to Los Angeles because her second pregnancy caused her to have postpartum depression, and she threatened to kill my little brother every day. So they separated the the two children from my mom while she got therapeutic help. So I was now living in Los Angeles, and the downtown area of Los Angeles had a plethora of movie theaters. And when I say I mean, I'm talking maybe in not even a one, maybe a 1 square mile area. They probably had 60 theaters, if not more. So I could randomize my visits and no one would ever think like, hey, this kid was just here yesterday. I could choose my theaters and it was great. I pulled this off. You would think that I was the general of an army. I'm like going, okay, so this day I'm going to go to that theater and that theater. And it didn't make any difference what film they were playing because this was what they called the grindhouse movie format. So every theater showed 3 films of at least. So you would see at least one film you would like, and maybe one of the other or two of the others you would tolerate. But still, they were fascinating to me because I just loved cinema. It was great.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I mean, you are very well known for your incredible guitar playing skills, but what made you choose to play the guitar?
So it's going to sound really stupid because I was quite gifted when it came to playing woodwinds. By the time I was 15 years old, I had graduated from the flute to the B flat clarinet, which fortunately had the same written range as the guitar. So I had tons of etudes, so like this ton of books because they gave these books away free when I was a kid. I mean, America's a very different place now. But anyway, what happened is this was the 60s and it was, the era of protesting and marches and stuff. And I would look pretty ridiculous in hippie culture walking down the street playing a clarinet. So, and plus it's not a harmonic instrument. So I was enthralled by the Beatles and I picked up the guitar one day and I bought a Beatles songbook. And since I could read music proficiently, I just thought, well, reading music is just reading music. And since the guitar was in the treble clef, um, the music looked very familiar to me. And I won't go into a long thing because I have a habit of doing that. But anyway, so the first song I learned was a really great Beatles song called A Day in the Life. And it was rather difficult for a novice guitar player to play. But because it was so difficult, it gave me skills that were beyond the level of a person who had only been playing for a few weeks.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, did you ever have a guitar teacher to help you out, or were you mostly self-taught?
Eventually, yes. In other words, once I became a pretty good guitar player, and the main thing that helped me was classical music because, as I said earlier, America had a standardized curriculum. So everybody was taught music just as everybody was taught math. Everybody had physical education. Everybody was taught, higher level math, algebra, geometry, trigonometry. This was just standard. It doesn't mean that you were good at it or that you learned it or that you would keep it for the rest of your life. But at the time, you had to be good at it and pass tests. So, because my parents were heroin addicts, I had a very nomadic childhood because they would spend their money on heroin and we would get kicked out of buildings. So, we were just moving around from place to place. So what happened was a benefit of this nomadic childhood was that every school that I went to assigned me a different instrument, whatever instrument was lacking in their ensemble. So by the time I was 12 or 13, I could completely orchestrate. So when I later on in life, when I was 17 or 18 years old, and I started to form my own pop bands, um, I could do everything. They used to talk about, there was a term that went around in those days called the self-contained band. And that was mainly coined because of the Beatles. The Beatles actually wrote their own music, whereas prior to the Beatles, almost everybody who was famous, who had hit records, the songs were written by songwriters, and those songwriters didn't happen to be in the band. But the Beatles wrote their own music, and so they said, oh, they're a self-contained band. I, with the child mind that I had, thought that that meant that they did all their orchestration and everything. So when I formed my own band, I did everything. So when you hear any of the music that I've done, no one has ever standed at the conductor's podium except for me because I wrote all the orchestration. I thought the Beatles did that. I didn't realize that there was some guy named George Martin doing that, and they wrote the basic song, but he did the sweetening. On my records, I do all, as Duran will tell you, I do all the sweetening. I brought in the horn section. I wrote those charts.
Oh, wow. I mean, that is so cool that you were able to do that. Now, say if you were to pick up a guitar now, do you think that you would still, remember how to play that first Beatles song you ever learned?
Sure. Oh, that's I made a recording of it for a charity not too long ago. It was for an Alzheimer's charity, and it was great because we killed it. It sounded great. It was my band is a pretty good band, and we're still very old-fashioned. So we play everything naturally, like whatever singing you hear is the way we sing. We don't use auto tune or any of that kind of stuff. We don't use any of the tricks of the trade that most people use in today's world because artistically it just doesn't feel the same. We'd much rather get it wrong and then play it again and get it right.
Right, yeah, okay. No, I totally get that. I guess it's just more authentic if you do it like that, isn't it?
Well, I can't really necessarily say that because if a person grows up in today's world, they believe that the way that they make music is authentic, and I can't criticize that. Look, I've had records with many EDM artists. One of my great musical partners was Avicii, and I loved working with him. I just finished a new song with Kygo a couple of days ago. I loved it. So they make records the way they make records. I do what I do. And when I was playing, I explained to Kygo, I said, look, you know, you just got to understand what I do is I play the song, I write out a little chart, and then I play the song from beginning to end, and I play it over and over and over and over again. And you can now go through what you like and what you don't like. But I played it for him over the phone, really old school. I played it for him over the phone, and I said, look, and I say this with 100% humility, that this is kicking ass. This sounds amazing. I'm so happy. This is. And he said, wow, that sounds great. I said, okay, now I'm going to give you like 20 more parts, and you knock yourself out and you do what you want with them.
Right, okay. Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, because you have quite a recognizable like style of music. With most of the music that you create, was it difficult to kind of like find what style of music you like to create, or did it just kind of come naturally?
Yeah, it sort of hit me like a spark, almost like when they say love at first sight. What happened is that I was a very serious jazz musician, and those were the gigs that I loved doing. Oh my God, I was so happy when I got what we called a straight ahead jazz gig, and we could just play tunes all night. And then every now and then I got to play original compositions because the jazz audience was open to the pop audience was open to original compositions back in the 70s. But my girlfriend at the time was a waitress at a very popular jazz club. And because of that, she had sort of carte blanche at the different clubs because either they were all owned by the same person or they were all friends and they gave perks to employees of the other clubs. And we just happened to walk into a disco that was somewhat of a pop-up disco because it was a restaurant that had gone out of business. So when they cleared all the tables out, uh, they just had this sort of beautiful space. And she and I walked in, and we were both jazz freaks. And we walked in and we heard this Donna Summer song called Love to Love You, Baby. And then right behind that, we heard the Village People song called San Francisco. And then right behind that, they played another song by a guy named Eddie Kendricks, who used to be in the Temptations, called Girl, You Need a Change of Mind. But the thing that was really incredible about this is that there was no break in musical sound. They went from one song and then the DJ mixed the other song into the song that had just played. So this was the only time in my life that I heard continuous music. I had never heard continuous music ever before that. It was amazing to me. And when the compositions were changing, the sound never went away. And I'm looking at my girlfriend going, what is this? And this was disco, so they called it. And all three of those compositions are amazing. I mean, the Donna Summer record is amazing. It's brilliant. It goes on for what seems like an eternity, and plus the DJ could also restart it from the break beat or the breakdown anytime he wanted. And then when he went into San Francisco by the Village People, I, who grew up in Greenwich Village, knew that this was a very political song about them being queer, and they were talking about, you know, queer life, and and I knew San Francisco at the time was popular for being very open to gay people. And then Eddie Kendricks comes on and he sings this song called Girl, You Need to Change Your Mind. Now, what I didn't mention is that I was a Black Panther at the time. So I was quite political, and all of these songs were very political as well as very musical and satisfying and continuous music. So I was hit with all this sensory overload that just blew me away. And it had accomplished in my mind what the Black Panther Party was trying to accomplish, but hadn't done so successfully, that it brought disparate peoples together. And I was like, wow, look at this. Because the crowd wasn't a white crowd or a Black crowd or an Asian crowd. The location of this club was right where Chinatown, Little Italy, Greenwich Village, which was the hippie stronghold, um, and a really popular Black club, which was only a few blocks away, had gone to this new club to check it out. So I saw, I was, I mean, imagine a person like me who had the political background, who had the musical background, who had an incredible imagination, who could who could play hooky at 7 years old for 75 days straight and not get caught. Imagine me getting all of this sensory information. And it also was great. It was not that the music was mediocre, it was great. I was like going in one split second. Well, not true. This probably took about 20 minutes. I went, that's the music I want to play. That's what I want to be a part of. I want to play music that when people hear it the first time, they react just like I reacted. And that's become my style that you're talking about. I do music that I try and capture your attention right from the word go. So if you think about the majority of my compositions, let's say about 75 or 80% of my composition, I've done a lot. My songs go, one, two, aw, freak out, or good times, or we are family, or let's dance. You hear it right away. I start with the hook, and most people build to the hook. I don't build, I start with the hook.
Yeah, I did notice that actually. When I was doing research on you and stuff, and I was listening to a lot of your music. A, I picked up on your style, but B, I did pick up on the fact that you usually always start with the hook, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and you know what it is? It's because I'm reliving that first night that I became what I called a disco musician, and I apply those rules to whether I'm working with a country artist like Keith Urban, or even somebody who is more hardcore country, um, or if I'm working with a sort of punk band or a grunge, or anybody, it doesn't mean, or if I'm doing a symphony orchestra. Right now, I'm scoring a film, and I played a couple of my cues for a friend of mine yesterday, who's also well, she's in the television business, and I said, if you listen to my cues, they're all things that I hope people remember and still serve the film. It still moves the film forward. And then I gave her an example of all my films that I've worked on. Everything from, Coming to America to Thelma and Louise and blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, listen to my cues. They're all catchy. They're all like, it's like, I want to be subordinate to the emotions of the film, because I discuss this, of course, with the director. But when I go home to compose, I'm still thinking like that guy who walked into that disco and heard this music that captivated me from the moment I heard it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that is so, so cool. Now, you worked very closely with your friend Bernard Edwards, and with him, you co-founded Chic. Now, he passed away in 1996. Would you be okay with telling me a bit about how that loss affected you?
Well, the loss was I would say triphasic. So the first feeling I felt was I I I don't think I've ever cried this hard in my life. I'm a two-time cancer survivor. So the first time I got cancer, I cried a lot. Second time, I was like, it's cancer. But when I found Bernard's body, so I'm the one who had the housekeepers at the hotel open the door for me, and I walk in and I find his body lying on the sofa, and I did everything in my mind to not believe that he had passed away. So I'm screaming at him, trying to get him to wake up, and doing all the stuff that we would do normally when we're laughing and joking. And then finally, I was brave enough to put two of my fingers on his face, and they were exactly the same temperature as the coffee table that was in front of the sofa that he passed away on. And then at that point, I just lost it because that was complete confirmation that he was dead and had been dead for some time. Um, so I cried hysterically. Then the thing that was really odd, so I say it was triphasic because then the next thing that happened, and this is all at the same time, um, within, an hour or a half hour or so, I got angry with him. I was furious. I was like, how the hell could you do this to me? Blah, blah, blah. Because the doctors warned you. They said, you have really bad pneumonia. You can go to the hospital. We didn't have to do this concert. The Japanese people are very respectful. We could have canceled it and done it another day. This was ridiculous. It was so stupid of you. Blah, blah, blah. I was furious. And and then I got romantic. I was like going, wow, how amazing is that? That you got to die doing what you love to do, because he passed out during that final concert. I, however, was the star of the show, so I didn't know. When he passed out, he was behind me, so I'm still looking at the audience. And when he passed out, it was in such a musical way. I couldn't believe it. I thought, so we were playing the song Let's Dance that I had produced for David Bowie, and he passed out in like the most musical place. And I kept thinking, damn, I wish I had done that even though the record was huge. I went, damn, I wish I had done the record like that. That was so cool. That was so clever. And then they revived him. All of this I was not aware of because I'm working the audience, and it's a Japanese audience, and it was big. And we were playing at the Budokan because when we were younger, we loved this record by a group called Cheap Trick a lot, live at the Budokan. So now this was Chic live at the Budokan. It was so huge for us. So I'm working the audience. Meanwhile, the people are working on Bernard. And when they finally revive him and he comes to, he also comes to in a very musical manner. And I'm like going, wow, that was so good. So that happened to be the last song in our set. And when I got backstage, he said, man, did you see that? And I went, see what? I'm thinking he's talking about the audience. Because the audience was reacting, but I didn't know. I thought they were just reacting to the good music. Um, he said, did you see that? And I said, what? He said, I passed out. I said, what do you mean you passed out? He said, yeah, I passed out. I fell out on the stage. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he explained it to me. So anyway, so when I found his body the next day after he went to bed, I started to relive all of these things that led up to his passing. And I remember his final words to me. I was going out to eat very late at night, and I asked him if I wanted him if he wanted me to bring him something back. And he told me no. I just need to rest. Those are his last words. I just need to rest. And and then the next morning, when he was supposed to leave to come back to the States, I was staying in Japan because the show was about me, and I was there sort of as an executive producer and a music director. they told me I had to wake him up because he's going to miss his flight. And when I went to wake him up, of course, he had passed away. So that triphasic thing that happened in, 30 or 20 minutes was first extreme sadness, second anger, third romantic, a romantic point of view, thinking like, wow, that's how I want to die. I want to be playing music and get to do the thing that I love the most up until my final moments.
Wow, I mean, yeah, I mean, I can totally imagine that that would have been, and I mean, just in those 20 minutes, like you said, and also I would imagine in the long run as well, like a total emotional roller coaster for you.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, like just listening to you talk about that there, I mean, I can't imagine how difficult that would have been to go through, and to sort of get through that. But yeah, I can imagine that so many different emotions and feelings must have sort of gone through you within, those couple of years after he passed away and stuff.
Yeah, it's and still I relive those moments, especially now that you ask me about it. I don't dwell on it. I don't think about it every day. I have a sort of weird saying that I live by. I look back, but I don't stare. So I don't make a big deal out of it. I just go back and remember it with, um, you know, a sort of, okay, I remember it, but I don't overly dwell upon it. I don't, like I said, I look back, but I don't stare.
Yeah, yeah, I totally get that. Well, I mean, during your career, you've worked with some phenomenal recording artists and you've also produced many huge hits. What would you say you enjoy about collaborating with other artists?
You just said it, collaborating with other artists. Because remember, I said to you earlier, I look at every production as just joining the band. And even if it's a film, what I do in my brain is I consider the film, the overall project, as the band. So I look at myself, and this is how I describe myself. I say, I'm a worker bee or a galley slave. I work like when I was younger, one of the movies that I saw during my 75-day run was a film called Ben-Hur. And there's a great scene in the film where this Roman commander is talking to the galley slaves, and he says, "You row to serve this ship, row well and live." And that's my credo. I live to serve the ship. I row well so the ship can sail straight and do whatever its mission is. And honestly, that's how I feel. And people say, "Oh no, you're so humble and you're so this." I just have this insane work ethic that won't go away. And I'm so happy that it doesn't go away. So the fact that I said to you that I'm sort of a little brain foggy and tired because I was up all night writing and reading, that's a beautiful life to me. That's what I chose to do. I mean, I didn't have to stay up all night. There's no super pressure on me. As a matter of fact, I haven't even spotted the film. So I'm composing without seeing the film. I'm composing just because I know the script so well. And I'm hoping that the script is nearly if the script and the movie are on the same level, it'll be phenomenal. If the film happens to be better than the script, oh my God. And it's a film starring John Malkovich, and he's singing in it and he sounds unreal. And we didn't do any newfangled tricks. There's no auto tune, there's no nothing. He is singing and we recorded him exactly the same way I record David Bowie or anybody, Diana Ross or Simon Le Bon or anybody else. There's no that's how you sound, and we work on it until it gets right.
Oh wow, I mean, that is really cool. And I'm sure that the movie is going to be amazing once it's done.
I hope so, because this is a director's first feature-length film. He's done a short film that was um, highly praised, and now this is his first feature-length film. And I know the pressure that can come with something like that, because now you're talking like into the millions of dollars, and now there's committees and people looking over your shoulder. Whereas when you're doing a short and you're doing it yourself, it's just your own artistic instincts. Um, but when it comes to big movies, and believe me, I've worked on a lot of big movies. Oh my God, the opinions that you hear and the stuff that people say sometimes is ridiculous. And thank God I'm just sort of like the low person on the totem pole. Musicians always seem like the lowest people on the totem pole. So I'm not afraid. Like I'm already rich, so I'm not afraid of getting fired or anything. And I've always been like that. I don't. If you fire me because you think I'm wrong, it's okay. I think I can get another job. So I'll talk to the director completely honestly. I will say, you do know that scene is a little bit ridiculous. It's not making sense. It's actually bringing you know here's something most people don't know. You've heard the term silent movie, right?
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a silent movie. When films did not have audio attached to the film, there was either an orchestra or a pianist or an organist playing in the front of the theater. So the music helps film move faster. So silent movie is just some thing that they say because the film doesn't have music tied to it, those early films, until in America, until Al Jolson did a film called The Jazz Singer. That was our first, what they call talkie, that actually had sound married to the film. But before that, you would go to the cinema and there'd be somebody playing music at the front of the theater. So there was no silent movies. Um, so I know that music is an integral part of cinema. So music on on just the simplest level does one important thing. It helps the movie move faster. And then it also gives you the emotion. It also shows you what like directors like to call traveling music. It shows that something is moving from here to there. It also gives you establishing music. Like when I did Coming to America, I know the director got angry with me because I had these African um, young gentlemen land in America. They fly the Concorde to America, and I do this bit where I'm scoring the Concorde, and it's this very sort of how do I say? It's this moving, sort of really cool theme. And I wish the plane lasted longer because I love this cue. But at the end of the cue, when they land into America, I play the American national anthem. I end this sort of, wonderful musical cue of the Concord. Dun, 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 dun. And he went, that's exactly what every director, that's exactly what every composer would do in America. Why are you doing that? Your score is so original. Why are you ending with national anthem? And I said, because at that point, it's establishing music. You don't put up a card that goes, they're now in America. You don't say, they're at JFK Airport in New York. So I played da, 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 da. The movie's called Coming to America, damn it. So now they're in America. So that's why I did it. There you go. We argued, but in the end, he said, okay, cool, it makes sense. And to the audience, it makes sense. Come on.
Yeah, no, I totally get that, to be fair. Well, we've kind of talked about your style of music, but do you have your own sort of unique approach to creating music?
Um, it depends on what phase of my life I'm in. So earlier, when I was playing woodwinds, Um, what's really interesting, and I go back and I think about this, that as much as I loved bebop and jazz, um, and as much as I loved classical, and we played the last orchestra I played in where I was playing the B flat clarinet, I didn't compose on the instrument. I composed in my head. And as I used to say to well, I didn't say it to my parents, but I used to score my life. So if I walked down the street, I I didn't have a lot of friends because my parents being beatniks and heroin addicts, they would always live in a part of town that probably most people didn't have children because they were artists or, actors, dancers, what have you. They lived pretty solitary lives because they were practicing their art form. Kids would be a distraction. So I didn't have many childhood friends until I became around 16, 17 years old. So I would score my life and I would superimpose my vision of the people that happened to be walking by or the people that I would spy across the street. And so I would give them themes. I'd give myself a pace that I was walking at, which is what's taught me how to score for films, because I realized that people in films sort of represent people in real life. We have a rhythm and a tempo that we sort of walk to. So that's how I can score the movie that I'm working on now without even seeing the film, because I have an idea of films being like this. And when you look at a cut, you'll see that almost everything at this tempo feels like I've actually like I've actually looked at the movie and wrote it, and you'll see that the title cards are changing and it's coming up at a tempo somewhere around here. And even if it's not exact, I can move it a few milliseconds either way, and you'll see that you'll go, how the hell did you do that without even seeing the film? And you know what I mean? It's just like I've done it enough times where I I learned how to do that. And a very, very famous film composer named Ennio Morricone, he told me, he says, Nile. My name is Nile, like the river, but in Italian, he says Nile. Anyway, he says, Nile, you compose every day. Just write every day. Don't even think about the movie. Write. Just write what you hear. Write what's in you. So that's why I was up all night. I was just writing. I was doing what Ennio said to me. Write. Just write every day.
Oh wow, I mean that is so cool because I'm currently studying for my GCSEs, which is basically like a British version of like your final exams. And one of the options I picked for that was music, and a big element of that is composition, and we have to do two contrasting compositions. And I guess I thought when I started that it was going to be easy. It is not. It is the opposite. Um, what doesn't help as well is the fact that I use a software on a laptop, but because I'm blind, I have to use a screen reader that goes along with that software. But the screen reader and the software, they don't want to be friends, and I don't think they ever have plans of being friends. So that really doesn't help. But I don't know how you do it because composition, maybe just because I'm new to it, but composition is so hard.
But see, that's why Ennio says write every day, because because if you write every day, it's and this is what the really valuable lesson that he taught me. What you may think is bad on Tuesday, maybe by the next Tuesday or the next month or the next year, you'll go back and listen and realize that it had a certain structure to the motif, and that it had a certain feeling that was completely viable. And maybe at the time that you listened to it back, you were too judgmental and you weren't open-minded. But then after a year or a week or however long it takes, you listen to it and go, oh, That's why I did that. That's why I wrote it. And guess what? What if I reharmonize the accompaniment with that? And I do this all the time. I'll write a basic motif and then I'll reharmonize the I'll reharmonize the support instruments, and you will be shocked at how cool it can be. I mean, because of my jazz background, I am obsessed with harmony and substitutions and all the theory that I know and learned. And when you listen to my songs, you don't think about it because that's not why I write it. I don't write it to make the listener go, "Oh wow, that's cool. He used the dominant flat five there with a flat nine too. That's really cool." Nah, no, I don't do it for that reason. I do it because it may just add interesting tension and motion for a split second to make this harmonic chordal passage easy to listen to, even though if you break it apart, you analyze it and go, "Oh my God, that's actually pretty complicated." But just because I'll choose the right leading tones and voice it a certain way, and also because I'm I mix up the way that I compose on the guitar and also mix up the way that I compose on the piano differently. And when I bring those two forces together, whereas with the piano, you know, I can play a lot of notes at one time. I could use the sustain pedal and with my 10 fingers, I can make a big chord. Well, on the guitar, it's very limited. You can only play 6 notes at one time. And so those 6 notes have to imply what the harmonic complexity or the harmonic simplicity is of the basic song structure. So you may say that these uh, these opposing compositions are fighting themselves, but you can you can actually take it if you have the discipline and also the open-mindedness enough to say, wait a minute, what if I started 2 notes later and that becomes the beginning? Like you might all of a sudden you have this sort of avant-garde cool thing that has structure that's unlike what you originally wrote, but next thing you know, you can, especially in today's world, you're using computers, you can toy around with this and move it around and say, holy cow, I never thought of starting on that note. So you may find that what seems complicated now is because you hear it a certain way and I'll just use the word forcing it to be that way. But if you say, wait a minute, now that I have these basic motifs and these basic structures, what if I just use my computer to move it, you know, for, like you guys use different terminology, but let's just call it a quarter note for now.
Mm.
Use it 4 quarter notes or 4 beats to the left or the right, and like listen to what that melody is. Oh my God. And then if you find something in it that's not melodically pleasing, you can just move the note. And I assume since you're doing it with computers, you're using MIDI. And, like I watched guys like Avicii just who could not, he didn't understand anything about music and structure or anything like that. When we worked together, I said, "Oh my God, Tim, do you realize that that chord there is whatever, you know, C sharp diminished or it's something that was really interesting to him. I'll say a C sharp half diminished. Half diminished. What does that mean? Well, that's a minor seven with a flat five. Like what does that mean? Don't worry, you played it. It's cool." Like he was fascinated. It was like, wow. So I assume that you have knowledge that may be beyond rudimentary. So, having an open mind is really cool. And also having computers and tools like that can help you do something that may not come to you naturally, but you put in the basic information and you're the composer and you're the person who can decide what's right and wrong. So it may not be nearly as hard as you think. It's just maybe you haven't approached it with like, oh, let me just move it around like puzzle pieces and see like, oh my God, look at that. All of a sudden, this fits.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I will definitely try to be more open-minded. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
But you know what it is that it's 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 sort of like not having an ego. It's like saying, wait a minute, just because so many of my friends they fail in music because they think, well, just because I did it, it's good. Whoa, hold on a second. You got to be kidding me. I've had dozens and dozens and dozens of hit records, and I never think, well, just because I did it, it's good. I actually have to work on it. People call me a songwriter. I say, no, I'm not a songwriter. I'm a song rewriter because the first thing I write is usually completely ridiculous. But it's ridiculous because I have a lot of knowledge and I'm trying to stick it all in at one time. And then I have to go back and rewrite it and realize that I did way too much for the average person to feel comfortable with. So I call myself a rewriter. I'm not a writer, I'm a rewriter because I rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it and fix it and go, oh, now it makes sense.
Oh yeah, I totally get that. That makes total sense. Well, like you mentioned a little bit earlier, you have been diagnosed with cancer twice. Once
Yes.
in 2010 and then again in 2017. Would you be okay with telling me a bit about that journey and how it impacted you?
Yeah. So the first time was, my God, that really freaked me out. And I thought I'd be a stronger person. And a good friend of mine who was an ex-Black Panther who was in my section, he's become a doctor. And he said he came up to my house to comfort me, even though I wasn't uncomfortable at first. I was just like, okay, cancer, let's deal with it. So he came up to my house and he said to me, these are all of the stages that you're going to experience. And he talked to me about this. And I'm like, oh, no way, I'm not going to do that. I'm not afraid. I understand that death is a, a part of life. I get it. Come on, dude. We went to science school. I get this. I accept it. And he said, no, 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 no. He said, you're going to be terrified. You're going to be, and he walked me through all these steps that he said that I was going to go through. And I denied all of them. Well, guess what? He was right. Everything he said happened. And I I thought everything that happened was to make me focus on cancer and made me afraid. One night I came home and I just turned on the television and it was this series about a person dying of cancer. I was like, what? All I did was turn on the television and there it was. And so uh, then I cried and then I was afraid. I was afraid of death and I didn't know how much pain I was going to be in at the end. Was I going to look like a concentration camp victim and be all skinny and then I'm a pretty skinny guy anyway. So was I going to be emaciated and I mean, just every possible scary thought that he told me I was going to think of, I had. Um, and and it was really difficult because it was hard for them to pinpoint my cancer. I had to have a number of biopsies before they finally found it because they had markers that were saying you have cancer, but they couldn't find the cancer. So the biopsies really hurt. These needle going into you and snatching skin out. And I'm like, so it was like every time they would schedule a biopsy, I'm like, oh no, I got to go through this again. Um, so that first time around was pretty horrible. But after he spoke to me, I did have a sense of balance. I was like, okay, I'm afraid this particular night, but it'll be okay tomorrow. So it was bad, but it actually wasn't that bad. And maybe because now time has gone by, I'm making it better than it was. The second time was a piece of cake. I was like, oh, cancer? Okay, got it. Nothing to it. You guys do what you got to do. Uh, oh, here's something important. This is the reason why I dealt with it so well. My doctor told me, please learn everything you can learn about the type of cancer you have. And you don't talk to anybody else. You make this decision on your own because this is life and death. And once you make that decision, then you live or die by that decision. And for me, that was really helpful because I never asked anybody their opinion. That first guy who told me, who has been my friend since I was 16 years old, um, he's a doctor and he was helping me go through the emotional part. But my doctors who were eventually going to either do the operation or have me go to wherever I chose to go to deal with it, they gave me that advice. Find out everything you can find out, meaning read. They knew I was an avid reader. Read about everything you can to find out about your cancer and your possible treatments. Don't talk about it with your friends or your loved one, and don't ask them to help you make that decision. You make it on your own because if something goes wrong, you could easily have animosity towards these people that were only trying to do the right thing. And guess what? They don't know as much as you because you're the one who's reading and finding out all this information. So if you just go along with somebody because it's what you want to hear, well, then that's on you, not on them. And so that's what I did. And I was at peace because I had a lot of knowledge of my first cancer at the time. The second time, I already knew what to do, so I didn't have to even think about it. I went to the doctor. He said, "Hey, we found this," and I said, "Yeah, blah, blah, blah. What do you think?" He said, "So and so," and I looked it up, and I said, "Hey, great, do that, and then let's do it." I walked out of the hospital like 2 or 3 days later, and I actually just stayed an extra day just because I liked relaxing. Because I just I could afford it and I could pay for it. So I said, "Look, I want to stay another day." And I don't feel like going back to work yet or going into that recovery mode at home, which is a wee bit of a pain. Um, um, anyway, so first time, a lot of emotion, but I had a great friend who was a doctor. Oh, and this is how he explained it to me to make me feel good right away. He said, when I was in medical school, I was in the OR this one particular week 3 times. The first 2 times, I was operating on a person. The third time, they were removing one of my testicles. And I never knew that. I've known this guy since I was 16. He's now telling me that when I'm in my 60s.
Right. Okay. Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I completely get that. I I completely get, second time round, I guess you're just kind of gonna kind of be a bit more cool about it because you're like, well, I've been through this before and I know what to do and I know I can get through this. So I get it does make sense that you'd be a bit calmer about it. Well, if you had to pick, what would you say is your proudest moment in your life so far?
Cutting school for 75 days in a row without being caught. At 7 years old. I was 7 years old. Remember that. It wasn't like I was an adult. I was 7 years old and I had everybody fooled. And the only reason why I got caught was because on the 75th day, I didn't know that my grandmother, whom I was living with at the time, had caught the flu or a bad cold. So when I came home, at the time that I would always designate as the time I should return home because everything would look normal, she was there already lying in bed sick. And it was like, oops. And I couldn't remove the letter from the police because in those days, the truant officers were part of the police department. So she had already gotten the letter Where is Nile? Has he been kidnapped? Is he killed? And I was like, oh no. So it all came to a head completely by accident. Had she not been sick that day, I could have probably gotten away with it for 100 days.
No, I totally respect that. I think that is a very great achievement, and I totally get why that would be your proudest moment.
It may sound pretty silly and juvenile, but if you could be the 7-year-old Nile and see how, as I said, I planned this with military precision, like nothing ever went wrong. I even, let me tell you something, I even had the police drive me to the movie theater one day. They saw this 7-year-old kid walking around. Oh, and by the way, this part of Los Angeles was called Skid Row. It was one of the most dangerous parts of town. But I didn't grow up believing in stranger danger or anything like that. So to me, adults were cool and I could engage with them. And because I had a very extensive vocabulary at 7 years old, I could talk to them and they didn't have to talk down to me. They understood that I completely, sometimes I would know words they were like dumbfounded. Like, what is he talking about? Non-Euclidean geometry. Like, what is this kid talking? What is this kid talking about? They didn't even know who Euclid was. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, okay, guys. So yeah, I got the police because Los Angeles is a very interesting city because the history of LA, it was built, it was sort of redlined. This was the black section, this was the Korean section, this was the Chinese section, the Japanese section, because all these people were living in communities because they served the more wealthy white clients who lived in Los Angeles. So we were there to cut their lawns, to deliver their groceries, to clean their houses, and what have you. So um, whenever I looked at a person, because my dad, the father who raised me, my stepfather was Jewish, I knew all these Jewish holidays, and I could look at a person and sum them up right away because I was also baptized Roman Catholic. So I knew just by understanding those two religious procedures, I could look at a police officer and say, oh, he's not Jewish because most policemen were of Irish descent, so they were probably Roman Catholic. Um, and I could look at him and say, oh, no, 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 this is a Jewish holiday today. Or remember, I was born with asthma. So I had a doctor's note and I went to Catholic school. So I could say, oh, no, no. In Catholic school, as you guys probably know, and that was the other thing is I would always say to the police, as you probably know, um, I woke up this morning with an asthma attack, but by 11 o'clock, it was over, and you can't go to school at 11 o'clock. So they just allow you to stay home. But I felt really good. So I came out to the movies. And I pulled that so many times. You couldn't believe it. And the police said, this is a dangerous part of town. So we'll drive you over, and they drove me to the movie theater. Now, it only happened once, but it was awesome. I'm like riding in a police car and they're escorting me to the movie theater, and I'm totally breaking the law.
Wow, okay. Well, Niall, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You're amazing, you're cool. I don't think there are enough compliments in the world that I could say to describe you properly. But it's been such a pleasure to meet you, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk to me.
And let me tell you that it's a pleasure to meet you, and you are charming and smart and wonderful, and you make me feel relaxed, even though, as I said, I'm brain foggy. Thank you. And it's really a pleasure, and maybe we'll get to hang out in real life at some point in time.
Oh my gosh, that would be so cool. I would love that so much.
Yeah,
Well,
I'd love to play flute with you. That'd be funny.
that would be really cool. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to my audience for listening. And I will see you all next time.